We are talking about getting people to do something on your website, whatever your goals are, whether it's filling out a form, buying a product, downloading a white paper. That's what this is about. Now, conversion testing. We're going to talk about that at the end, but before we get to the testing part, we got to talk about what to do with your website before you're ready to do that. Where this presentation comes from, to give you a little background, is we have a lot of clients who come to ClickSo and ask us, hey, we want to do conversion testing. There's all these cool tools out there. There's this huge startup boom, so there's tools for everything now. Conversion testing is a big deal. It's gaining a lot of popularity and people want to test. Well, the problem is most websites aren't ready to be tested yet, and that's because they haven't done some of the basic things from a website usability perspective and conversion optimization to the point that we can actually get a test implemented that's going to have meaningful data and answers at the end. So that's where this is coming from. So first, whoops, Google Drive doesn't like things. There we go. So first, here's what we're going to talk about. 3 pillars of conversion. My colleague Matt Dombrow just spoke in the past session, and he talked about one of the 3. We're going to cover the other 2 today. So that's the connection here for those of you who had the luxury of seeing him a couple minutes ago. We're going to talk about information architecture and on-page best practices. These are 2 important things that go along with those 2 pillars we're going to talk about to help make sure that we're ready to test the sites in the end and make sure that what we're going to get is meaningful results. Low-hanging fruit, we'll talk about some specific examples of things that you guys can actually take away today, start improving, and then you're ready for testing at the end. And then we'll talk about those conversion testing techniques. So, 3 pillars of conversion: relevancy, value, and clarity. Right in the middle, that's where conversion happens. So Matt talked about value. That's a whole nother separate issue. That's about pricing. It's about value propositions in terms of what are you really offering compared to your competitors. I don't want to go there today. What we want to talk about is relevancy and clarity. So let's start with relevancy first. Relevancy is at the intersection of what you want to say and what your website visitors are interested in. If you're not speaking their language and you're not talking about the things that they have questions about, they're gone. It's only one click to get away. So, how do we do this? So first of all, there's 4 basic visitor types that we cover. That anyone's going to arrive on a website, and they're going to usually fall in one of these 4 broad categories. So they know exactly what they want. Basically, these are people who may be return visitors. They've done a lot of research on your competitors' websites. They've read a book or something like that. So they have some idea of what they want, and they're very geared towards finding exactly some specific piece of information. There are those who sort of know what they want. Maybe they're just beginning their research process. And then we have those that aren't really sure. So maybe they know they have a problem, but they don't even know where to go. So they happen to stumble on your website. And then there are others that just completely arrive by mistake. And those search engines, they're not always perfect. So setting page goals and priorities. So how are we going to talk to these people and make sure that we're relevant? It's what visitors want to know, and then what visitors, I'm going to use my pointer here, and what visitors want to do. So we need to make sure that we're aligning with what we want them to know and how we're going to get them to move forward in this process and be relevant. And then what do we want them to do? Click that big orange button, fill out that white paper, hopefully buy something, or give us a phone call at the end. That's usually the macro conversion we're looking for. Switch gears real quick, because this is going to lead into some important stuff here. So I want to talk about analytics and metrics. So we have at our disposal, thanks to Google Analytics being free, so much data that we can look at. People don't know where to start with all this data and how to figure out what to do, where to get going, what should I be looking at to figure out where I'm not converting, where I'm losing visitors. So here are the 3 main ones that we want to look at. Browser resolution, know where your fold is. Be able to make sure that your website can actually be seen by the people who are on your site and trying to get around. Browser type, not as big of a deal anymore. Thankfully, IE6 is going away, so those rendering issues aren't as big of a deal anymore. But there are a lot of browsers out there, and you need to make sure that your site works, especially in the ones that most of your visitors are using. And that's where you can find out. Google Analytics is really good at this. So use the data that you have. Make sure that you don't have rendering issues as well. Things like JavaScript, Flash, if you're using that. Make sure that the visitors' browsers that they have, make sure that your stuff works in there so they can actually read and see what's on your site. Also, bounce rate and exit rates. This is a big one. So people don't really know where to get going. Take a look at the pain points in your website. Where are people showing up and leaving right away? And then where are they going through, clicking multiple pages, and then exiting without actually doing some sort of conversion action that you're hoping for? Whether that's the white paper, buying something, whatever. Phone calls. That might be the other one from a lead gen perspective. The last one here is pathing. And IA stands for information architecture. It's the fancy name for your sitemap. That's all that is. This is the biggest issue that I see when people want to talk to us about conversion testing. Basically, their site is in such disarray, and I'll show you some examples here, of trying to understand, well, how are we going to get people to convert? Well, we don't even know where they're supposed to go yet. So, and this takes a lot of work too. It's not just moving buttons around on a page. This is changing the way people are going to flow through your website. So, here's what a lot of people's websites look like. The blue boxes are the main pages. It might be your home page, it might be your service offerings, maybe specific service offerings, and then they'll get down into the orange area here. This would be your lead forms or your shopping cart. These purple ones here, these are your pages. These are your white papers. It's some ancillary stuff. It's about us. It's about our management team, things like that. Stuff that's important, but it's not part of the conversion process in terms of these are the main pages that people need to know and the information that they need to know before they're willing to call or buy this particular product. So what we want to do is we want to organize things into an ideal funnel. So these 4 pages should line up. This is how we'd like our visitors to follow. Go through these pages. Hopefully they end up in the shopping cart, purchase, and walk away happy. But what they may do is they may bounce back and forth, and then they'll come back in the funnel, and they're going to kind of take their own path. What this does for us is our analytics can't give us good answers if our website is so messed up in the first place that we get this. And then people are bouncing all over the place and we don't understand the relationship between our pages. So it's important to organize your site and have some idea of what you would like people to do. That goes back to that square that I showed you guys a couple slides ago. And make sure that your website is organized to a point. This is what we'd like people to do. If they veer off that path, no problem. We have a way to push them right back into that funnel where we want them. And then they always have some idea of also where they're going. Because people can get lost on websites very quickly because it's easy to make another page and have a 500-page website, outside of your blog, that is. And so let's make sure that they have some concept of where they're headed and feel like they're making progress towards their research or buying process, whatever they're trying to do. Let's talk about clarity, the second pillar. So, scanning and skimming. Basically, this is how visitors react on your website. How are we going to provide the clarity to allow them to read stuff, see what we're all about, or whatever that product is about, and how do I purchase it or call you or whatever it is that they're trying to get done. So, first of all, visitors aren't stupid, they're just in a hurry. And with the internet, they're in a bigger hurry every single day. There's more and more stuff to do. It's easy to click away. So the whole point is make sure that you grab their attention right away. And we'll talk about some examples here in the end. 5 seconds or less. That number keeps decreasing. You'll hear 8 seconds. You'll hear 2 seconds. It all depends on what you're selling and how much competition is out there. But generally speaking, if you can't explain what you're doing in 5 seconds very quickly, you're going to lose a lot of people. Importance of persuasive headlines and images. So this goes with the 5 seconds or less bullet. The idea here is that basically we want to make sure that the headlines and images, those are the first 2 things that most people are going to see on the website. Make sure that that's relevant and that they understand this is what we're about, and get them to engage with the actual text that's on the screen. You might also have a video or something like that. Scan first. So basically, imagine someone coming over the hill and there's this big vista. When someone is scanning, all they're doing is noting, okay, it looks like there's a lake over here, there's a mountain over here, maybe a tree, but they don't know how many trees. Maybe there's 2 lakes, but it's all blending together. They kind of have a blurred vision. And that's what they're doing when they first come to your website. They're kind of scanning the page. Oh, there's an image here, looks like the logo's up here, there's some text down here, but they're not actually reading anything just yet. Then they switch modes, and again, this is happening, I should note, this is happening in milliseconds here. Then they move to a skim mode, where basically now we're going to start reading a little. I'm going to see some headlines, going to take a look at maybe the first sentence of a paragraph or something like that, and they may not even read the whole thing. They're looking for keywords and things like that, and this is sort of the stepwise fashion that they're using to engage with this website, and that's how you want to do this. To use the cliche, conversion is like an onion. Peel it 1 layer at a time, and the idea is help them drill down into that information that they're looking for. So, elements that affect clarity. Headlines and images, we talked a little bit about that. The idea here is grab the attention of them right away and then make sure that we get them to read that first body of content. There's a misnomer out there that people don't read on websites. That is not true. People absolutely read on websites, ones that are relevant and presenting the right information in small dosage that they can actually comprehend and get further and further into the website and find the answers that they're looking for. Readability. If they can't read it, they can't buy it. If they're using all kinds of jargon that doesn't make sense, depending on, if you're in a niche industry and people who are coming to your website kind of already know what you guys do, okay, you might be able to get away with this. But there's a lot of websites out there in terms of, we have people with lower reading levels. There's studies out there anywhere between 5th and 8th grade is the average reading level. And basically, we need to be able to communicate effectively and not scare people off. The other thing is, if they have in their mind some sort of keyword phrase that's part of their problem or questions that they're trying to answer, make sure you're using those target keywords. And that kind of goes with the SEO game. Use white space and subheadlines. So I don't see enough white space out there. This is a general comment, but white space is your friend. You don't have to fill up every section of the page with something. It's okay. It's a lead process in terms of, if you give them the right information, they'll keep clicking forward. It's kind of the breadcrumb theory. If it's relevant and it's answering their questions, they keep clicking. Calls to action. This is a big one. I see a lot of websites out there, they don't have a button, they don't have a form at the end, or they don't have some sort of link or something to tell people, what do I want you to do next? Now, they may not agree with that, and there's other ways to get around that issue, but the point is, you got to tell people what to do next. You have to guide them through their entire experience here. And then I always include at least one call to action on every page, and I have some examples here of what not to do as well as what to do. So let's talk about the low-hanging fruit. What can we do right away to get things started and get our site ready for testing? So first of all, headers. Basically, first area viewed by a visitor, this is to help orient themselves. So basically, the first thing they're doing is coming over that vista. All right, am I in the right spot? The logo's up in the upper left-hand corner. Maybe it's in the center of the screen. That's fine. At least I know I'm on the right website. That's checkbox number one. Following standard web conventions, that's the logo concept I was talking about. Have your search bars and utility navigation, like checkout links and things like that. Have it in the upper right-hand corner. People are used to that. That's what the web has sort of kind of worked its way out, and that's what people are used to seeing, and they expect those elements to be there when they come on the page. So don't surprise them, because then it kind of takes them back and they lose focus of what they were there for in the first place, and a lot of those good concrete elements of information are going to be lost. So some best practices: create a defined header area, maintain consistency. So I see a lot of websites, they change the header on every single page. Make sure that you have a consistent header. It helps ensure people know that they're on the same website. If they feel like they're going off different sites, they're going to be constantly checking that URL in their browser, and it's one more distraction factor. Prominent logo in the center on the left, utilities and phone number on the right, I mentioned that, and then an optional unique value proposition. So I have an example here that shows free shipping and how someone's using a little extra space in their header to point out that this is a big thing. Free shipping is important to their customers, so they want to make sure that they know right away, no matter what page they land on, that we offer free shipping. So here we go. So here's a bad example, and I'm being over dramatic here to point out what not to do. But in this case, we're not really sure where the header starts and where it begins. So obviously it starts at the top here, but basically we've got this kind of dragon line here on an angle. It follows this. They got their logo in the center. It's buried with their navigation here. So not a great looking site to begin with, but the point is we have no idea where this header starts and begins, and we need to help frame where in the body all the good content lies. Here's another example, a little bit better. So logo here, we can kind of see they've got some white space here, but they've got these logos. Things are kind of jammed with the phone number. So things are generally in the right place, but we could probably use a lot more space. It's okay to sacrifice some of this vertical space on the page to make sure people know they can find what it is that they're looking for when they need it. But then they still do a nice job of focusing people in the center here in terms of what they're trying to do. There's a lot of things that are wrong with this page, but they're definitely on the right track. Here's two more examples. Now I can tell you firsthand, I helped design these. So the point is, right here we're using the navigation to separate the header. This is the main page. I just cut it off a little bit. Here's that free shipping value proposition. They know they're on wineRackStore.com. And then we have the phone number here on the right. That's where people expect things to be. They expect the search bar to be somewhere in that general vicinity. You can deviate a little bit here and there, so some people might have the search bar below, whatever, that's fine. But these are just some of the web conventions that we want to make sure people are aware of, and they don't have to think twice about it. Here's another one, Boulder Logic. A little different, they set up their nav menu on the side here, but their page actually stops. We have some really high contrast here that shows this is the header area and this is the main content. They've got a nice big headline to tell you what this page is about. So a lot of good things happening here. Again, not perfect. There's definitely a lot of things that could be improved or optimized, and we do that with testing. But we know that we've got a good start here with these pages, and they're following good best practices, and we have some sort of baseline and know what we're going to get out of this when we run our first test. Second piece of low-hanging fruit, navigation. This is a big one. I see a lot of websites out there that mess this up pretty badly, and this kind of goes back to the architecture issue, making sure that your site is well organized. So first of all, understand that navigation is used when people are lost. That's the only time they use it. If you have good calls to actions that are obvious and can be seen, then they're not even going to use that nav menu. And that's where we want their eyes. We want them in the center of the screen with all that good content. There's two types of navigation typically. There's the main navigation, so you'll see, like in these examples here, this would be the main navigation, this would be the main navigation, and then the other one would be utility navs, basically client login, schedule a demo. You could argue if that one's really utility. Search boxes, that's a utility type of approach. These are things that any visitor might want at any given time in their experience. It's the shopping cart link, view my cart, that kind of thing. Those are the utility pieces. In terms of best practices for navigation, so maintain consistency, just like the header. People start switching navigation menus on their website because they got into some particular vertical in their site. Well, there's other ways then to introduce a whole new set of navigation menus because people lose perspective of where they are on the website. And when they start feeling lost, they start kind of backing away and they get confused, they get frustrated, and then they're gone. Logically organized elements. We'll talk about the 7 plus or minus 2 theory, but basically the idea here is don't make your navigation list so long that people will have a difficult time reading them. And I have a couple of techniques that I'll show you how to do that. Avoid duplicate elements. A lot of this that I see, particularly on e-commerce sites, where we have two categories that are listed differently and then they plop the same product or same subcategory into that higher category. It confuses people. They don't know if it's the same or if they should click on this one or that, and then you find them bouncing back and forth only to see them reload the same page twice. So again, that's where analytics kind of loses its value when we don't have this stuff set up correctly. Keep drop-down and fly-out menus to one level. So this one is more of a usability factor, particularly if you're dealing with people who have trouble navigating websites, particularly older people, their hands are shaking, things like that. If they're trying to hold fly-out menus in 2 or 3 different levels, it can be very frustrating for them. And it's also very difficult to read. And then justify using multiple navigation menus. Basically, the rule of thumb is e-commerce sites are about the only websites that should be out there that have 2 navigation menus. If you're a lead gen site, arguably, if there's certain circumstances for, make every exception here. But the point is, most sites only need 1 main nav menu, and you can use flyouts in a good way to organize all of your content and get people where they need to go. So let's look at the bad examples first to show you what not to do, and then we'll look at a couple good ones. So here, this site, this was, just to give you perspective here, the mouse, basically, my arrow would be about the same height as each one of those rows, and we've got a 3-level flyout here. So if my mouse basically was trying to come across here and I missed it, the whole navigation menu would collapse again. Now this site has since fixed that, but this is a big usability error, and it just creates a lot of unnecessary anxiety and frustration. It's one thing that your visitors should not have to worry about in terms of being able to actually click on stuff. Let's look at it one step further. We have CD Media, Gold Archival Grade CDR, whatever that is. Then we have, on the one level up here, Archival Gold Silver Media, and then we have Archival Gold CDR. No idea what the difference is. They are, in fact, the same page. So by listing the duplicate elements in different names or even the same names, it causes a lot of confusion with visitors. Here's another one. So this drop-down menu, it's actually the same nav menu with the exception of these sub-elements. You don't need to do that twice. People know where the nav menu is. It's right up here. If they want to see it because something in the center of the screen here isn't resonating with them, that's all right. Let them use the nav menu. Otherwise, this is valuable real estate that could be used to put good, solid content, images, video, whatever makes sense to get people or keep them engaged with your web page. So how do we do this? So first of all, how many categories in this list? Anybody? 3, 4? two: colors and sizes. So basically, here's where the 7 plus or minus 2 rule fits in. Basically, it's a study that was done, I forget the gentleman's name, but basically what it's saying is that the average human being can process 7 individual pieces of information at any given time. So 7 numbers, 7 words in this case, and plus or minus 2 for some variation in terms of people's brain capacity. It's not a diss against anyone, it just is. In terms of helping organize things, we can tell very quickly here, this is the same subset of lists. I just broke it out and do it in a slightly different way, so you can quickly see that there are 2 categories here. And then if I'm interested in looking at sprockets by color, great, I know exactly where to go, and it's a smaller list. I can process that very quickly, and I don't have to think as much, and it allows people to move forward in the process with a lot less friction. So here's an example. Here's what Norton's doing. They're basically following exactly the example I just gave. Basically, they've got a headline here, and then some of the sub-nav. Now, all of these are clickable, but the point is if they had just listed all those in the same font size and style, it'd be a lot more difficult to read, and people would spend a lot of time looking at these nav menus trying to figure out where to go next if the content in the center isn't working for them. Homepage, here's a big one. So moving on to the next low-hanging fruit, things to work on before you should consider testing your website. It's often most traffic page. That's probably a pretty true statement for most websites. It's also the most difficult page to optimize. And the reason is because it has to meet every visitor scenario possible. Anyone who's already in the beginning and buying process to all the way to someone who's just starting out their research or whatever it is that their buying process looks like for your product or service. So you have to be able to get people on this page, tell them quickly what you're about, and get them into the right section of your site based on where they are in their buying process. The other thing I'll point out here, for those of you who are in larger organizations, there's a lot of internal competition for homepage real estate. People want to be on the homepage. You know, I'm in the HR department and we've got something going on there. We want to promote it, or whatever. There's a sale going on or something like that. Yeah, it might be important, but what's really important is getting the conversion action at the end. So let's make sure we get them in the right spot on the website so we don't lose them. Again, it's only one click away to walk off a website. Best practices. So the goal of any homepage is get them off of it as quickly as possible. Put them on an internal page that's very relevant to what it is that they're looking for. Your homepage should quickly tell you who you are, what do you do, and why is it relevant to the visitor. One primary call to action. There's a Boulder Logic example here I'll show you. In terms of, we basically have one call to action. It's a nice big orange button. Probably could be a little bigger. I'll show you here in a second. But the point is, that's what we really want them to do. We have other outlets, though, if that doesn't resonate with them. If they're looking for something else, maybe they're in a different part of the buying process, that's okay. We have other things for them to do there beyond clicking that orange button, which they probably have already clicked in their past visit if they were a return visitor. So let's look at a bad example first. So here's a home page for CE Quick, and again, it's not to slam them or anything, but we're working on helping them out to, what do you want people to do on this page? We've got the CE tracker down here. You can find hundreds of courses. There's the CE Select subscription with a tiny little button there if you even noticed that. So there's a lot of things happening here. I still don't really know what you guys do. And that's a problem. We need to be able to send people off into the next page depending on what it is that they're here for. If they already know who CE Quick is, well then maybe they want to log in or they want to see what the courses are. So maybe that's what, maybe this is relevant. But if I've never been here before and I don't know who CE Quick is or what you guys offer, then maybe it's this or maybe it's this tracker thing. Who knows? Here's a different example. So this is a page that I helped design. Basically, here's our big orange button. This is really what we want people to do in the end. We've got some bullets here, nice big headline. Customer reference management made easy. Simple as that. What do these guys do? Customer reference management. Now, what is that? Hopefully you're on the site because you're looking for that. But that being said, if you're not sure, we got a nice video over here too. So this button and this video are basically the two most prominent elements in the screen, and I can prove it. Here's an eye tracking study. It's not a true eye tracking study. It's actually a model that was generated by a computer algorithm. But the point is, it helps us get pretty close and do a gut check. All the hot spots here, right on this button, right down on the video player, got Boulder Logic, so people are checking that logo to make sure they're in the right spot. Then we've got a little, this might be a little inaccurate, but we've got this Salesforce logo here. That was by design because Salesforce is an important element to have on their site because it has their product has to integrate with Salesforce. That's a big deal for them. So the point is, we have that here. So we've got some outlet links. So basically, if you don't like this orange button, well, maybe you want to look at the features and services, or maybe you want to learn more about the Salesforce integration. So we have other outlet links beyond the primary call to action that we're really going for. And this will help people orient themselves and get into the section of the site that they're looking to get that information or whatever question they're trying to get answered. Interior pages. Arrange your information architecture to match the ideal path. So I showed you the funnel concept. The idea here is, again, think about what you want people to do and make sure you line it up that way, and then start offering the content on the page that is relevant and will resonate with them to get them to keep clicking through that funnel. Buying versus research, so you have to know what your visitors' goals are. It's okay if they deviate from that ideal path and maybe they leave and come back and maybe it's a two or three visit conversion process. Not a problem. You just have to know what it is or have some idea of what you think it is to get started in the testing process so that you can orient your pages in a way that makes sense and you can use that analytics data. So a couple of best practices for interior pages. Clear heading, a visual anchor image. We talked a little bit about this earlier. So the idea is use images to your advantage. Don't use lifestyle images of a couple people hovering over a table and they're looking at a computer screen. That doesn't tell anybody about what you really do. Try and find something that makes sense. It's relevant to the topic that people are looking for. Don't go stray too far off the path. Sometimes people try and make these kind of weird connections. And while you may get it, you need to stay in a very simple fashion, and it needs to be very quick and easy for them to understand. So you don't want to get too cute with images, but use them to your advantage, and I'll show you how we do that for some of our clients. Use subheadlines and images to break up long text. So we'll see there's lots of pages out there that have way too much text on them. And it's okay to have that text. Just break it up. Make it in little chunks that people can digest. If they like this paragraph, great. If they don't like the second one, skip it and they can move on. At least they know where to look next to move on in their conversion process. Calls to action above the fold, middle, and end of pages. This is a big one. I see a lot of pages that just have content on them, but then you don't tell me what to do next. So make sure that if people don't get all the way down to the bottom of your page, make sure you've got something in the middle of it to tell them where to go, or if it's a short page, maybe you can get away with a top and a bottom. But you always want to make sure there's a call to action above the fold before they scroll anywhere, as well as once they get down to the bottom and tell them where to go next. Hey, if you've read all this and you like what you're seeing, here's the next step to keep moving forward. So here's a bad example. So here's all this content in here. I'm showing you the whole page deliberately, not the above the fold view, because the point is that there's nothing in here that truly stands out to tell me what to do next. This is this little button over here. That's a side advertisement. It has nothing to do with what's here in the center of the screen. Just take my word for it. They've got a customer testimonial here. It's great to have it, but it's super long. It's really hard to read, and it blends in with the rest of this stuff. So people don't really know what to do on this page. Plus, we have this banner up here that life is richer within contact. I don't know what that means. Is that really relevant to your customers? And if it is, let's assume that it is for a second, there's no button or anything. There's nothing for me to do on this page. This thing isn't actually clickable. So how do we deal with all this information that's important? Particularly in contact, they have a really complex product. It's not something that people can just understand right away. It's also niche. We assume that most visitors on the site are going to have they're going to have some sort of knowledge of what In Contact does already, or they offer customer service phone systems. But the point is, there's a lot of text here, so how do we break that up? So here's a couple of different techniques. So here's a client that we were working for on behalf of Costco, and basically, you'll notice we've got the main area here, so this is a guarantee. We've got the header, so people know this is about business phone service. There's some tabs here that we're using to break things up in this area. I had to cut the page just to make sure it fit on the slide. But basically, we're using images and nice big headlines to break things up. It's easy to see. 1, 2, 3. 3 paragraphs. These are value propositions that we know people are interested in for this particular company, so we want to make sure that they're easy to see and read, so they actually start engaging with this font, or excuse me, this content that you guys can't actually see. Here's another example. You'll notice the alternating images. So it's easy to see. 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. Yeah, there's a lot of text here, but it's broken out with headlines and images. Is the image, you could argue maybe that image isn't as relevant as it could be, whatever this movie clip thing is. But the point is, we're using it to break things apart and make it more digestible. So if people don't like something about improved conversion rates using video analysis, no problem. You can skip down and see that we're not a substitution for end user testing, whatever that means. The point is, people can quickly see what it is they can look at and skip over things and find the answers that they're looking for. So let's talk about conversion testing. So hopefully that gives you some idea of some things you can take away, start working on right away, and get your site prepped so you can actually start testing this stuff and using data to your advantage and finding out what really does work as opposed to going on some gut instincts. And you have to go with your gut to start and try some things out, but in the end, you can use testing to your advantage. So real quick, basics of testing. So there's two types of outcomes when you run conversion tests. And you're going to hear, for those who don't know, you're going to hear two types of tests. A-B split test or ABN split test. So you might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, any number of versions. You also might have, what you'll hear is a multivariate test. So that's using multiple elements on the page and using all kinds of different combinations and trying to figure out what combination of those elements is going to make an impact on your conversion rates. The multivariate part is very difficult. You have to have a lot of traffic to your website. So I think a good statement here is most websites, especially if you've never done testing before, stick with ABN testing to start until you get comfortable with it. And then if you have the data rates and the traffic to do things, you can get into the multivariate thing. It gets a lot of fun, especially if you have a large company. You can start placing bets and things like that. People can suggest something. You can make it really interactive, but it takes a lot to do that. So start simple. The why is more important than the what. So when you run a test, let's run a simple A-B split test here. So version A, that's our original, and then the new version. And you might change all kinds of different things on that page. So, okay, we might know what it was that improved things. Okay, people definitely are clicking more on that big orange button that we improved. Okay, great, that's a good thing. Why are they doing that? Why are they on the site? What was it that resonated with them on the page and got them to click on that button? That's the answer. And unfortunately, the data isn't going to tell you that outright. You have to read in between the lines. But the point is, once you have your site set up based on some of the practices we just talked about earlier, you have a much better concept of understanding what it is people are trying to do and why they're doing that when you make certain changes on your site. That's the point. You don't want to be shooting in the dark with these testing concepts. One, testing can be really expensive. And it's very time intensive. Start simple but with significant variation. So this is a big one. I see a lot of people say, well, let's run an A-B split test and let's try a green button versus a blue button. All right, well, if you don't have any concept of what your visitors are truly reacting to, you got to make big changes. And a simple change like that takes a lot of visitors to generate enough data to actually say, yeah, we're pretty sure that that's going to work, one color or the other. So when you start with your A-B split test, make big changes on your page. It should look very different. Maybe use the same color scheme, but move things around. Try some different things based on some of the stuff we talked about here earlier, and make that big significant change because you want to know what's working and what's not. Even if it fails, it's okay. At least you know what's not working, and you can make the next step to try a new test and have some sort of educated guess moving forward. Another big thing, beware of the external factors. So I see a lot of tests that get run, and all of a sudden the email department sends out a promotion. And all of a sudden we see our conversion rates spike because there's very targeted traffic that just showed up in the middle of our test, and it completely flops. So segmentation's a big issue here. You're going to see a lot of articles being written about that. They already are coming out. But segmenting new versus return visitors, segmenting people from a certain geographic location. But you have to understand some of these external factors that are going on. If you're going to run a test on snow shovel, maybe you're selling snow shovels, and all of a sudden a snowstorm shows up, well, yeah, you're probably going to have a pretty high conversion rate because there's people looking for snow shovels. So that's a good thing in terms of you can probably find out a lot of information, but know that your conversion rate probably is going to be higher than it will be in July, and you need to understand how that affects the people that are coming to your site and whether or not they're truly going to buy a snow shovel on the 4th of July versus the 4th of December. Testing pitfalls to avoid. So one is lack of planning and priming. So all the things we talked about, again, we get sites out there, they're not ready to test yet. And sorry, you can make all these changes we talked about. You don't need to test whether or not your logo should be in the left-hand corner or buried in the center of the page. That's not something that is even test-worthy. So the point is, make the changes that matter, but plan ahead. Have some idea of how you want to rearrange your site and make sure that you have some idea of what your ideal funnel looks like so that people know where to go, and you have some idea of they deviate here and then exit, all right? At least we know what page they're exiting on and why they're doing it. We have some better concept as opposed to, well, a bunch of people got here, and then they all left. Well, all right, we don't, based on that first funnel I showed you guys, the chaos doesn't help us in terms of analytics data. Testing complexity is a big one. As I mentioned, if you've never done this before, don't start with multivariate testing. Start with an easy split test with significant variation, and just try 2 versions, see how it goes. If you fail, it's still a win. In the end, you know what not to do at the very least, and you can make changes, and then try a couple other variations, and then try an ABC or an ABCD test, something like that. Again, not enough variation. If you're just testing the movement or different colored buttons and things like that, it's probably not a good place to start. You know, unless you have a really well-optimized site to begin with, but you've just never done testing before, make sure you have significant variation in your different versions that you're trying to find out, you know, which one works better or worse, as the case may be. This is a big one, mimicking competition. We have a lot of clients say, well, competition X over here, they're doing this. Yeah, but you don't have access to their data. How do you know it's working for them? And maybe their clients are a little different, or their customers are a little different than yours. Maybe it's a slightly different niche. Maybe the color scheme of your website doesn't, offends them more than your competition does. There's so many factors that you don't understand or know about your competition. So while it's great to get ideas, particularly, and this is more on Matt's side, what he spoke about an hour ago on value. You know, they start trying out different sales processes, or they're giving away something out there. Okay, maybe that's a good thing to try so you can sort of play to keep up with the Joneses game. But the point is, you don't want to just be testing button colors and different layouts for the sake of the fact that your competition is doing it. The big one here is striving for statistical significance. So this is a big misnomer. For those who have dabbled in conversion testing before, I see a lot of clients that want to run tests all the way to statistical significance. It's important because, particularly if your boss is unsure or you have a difference of opinion as to what works and what doesn't from a conversion standpoint, you need that data to help back up your hypothesis and what you're trying to do within your company. But the big thing is, people will cut off their nose to spite their face because they want to reach that 98% confidence level, and I don't want to go too far into that because we don't have much of a primer here on conversion testing in terms of statistical significance. But the point is, we run a test like this. So this is an actual test that we ran. Don't mind the green line. We cut that version off for a reason. But these other 3 versions, so the original, the control is actually the blue line, and then the two competitors are the orange and yellow. Well, okay, there was a lot of juxtaposition going on here. Things were changing once we got the test rolling. But basically, somewhere around December 22nd, give or take, we started to see basically everything kind of flatline. So at this point, we could have let this test run. And just so you know, the statistical significance when we cut this thing off here on January, whatever it was somewhere around like 60%. Definitely not in the realm of being able to have a high confidence of saying, yeah, this version is definitely, whatever version that was, version B, was better than the original. But the point is, we could have let this test run for another year, and we may not have known because those versions were to the point that none of them are going to dip up or down enough with the control to know that one's a winner over another. So the idea is, take what you can get and say, all right, we're going to assume that it was version B was better, move on. Because what's the cost benefit of not running another test on top of what you just did and taking what you've learned, or you make that assumption and move forward? So striving for statistical significance is a big one. If you're seeing numbers flatline, take the winner and move on and try something else. And it's sort of narrowing things down. You get down to, or you come from making big changes on the site down to you can get to that, well, should it be a blue or green button or a red button, or should it be on the left side or right side? Those are the things you can do further down the road. Obviously, you need a lot of data, but don't get caught in this. When you start seeing numbers flatline like that, or if you have a consultant who's doing this and they're like, well, we got to make sure we get to 98% confidence or whatever because that's part of our criteria. Just tell them to stop, cut it off, and do something else, and just give them, call it good, and say, all right, we learned something. We think this is where we're going to go, and move on. So in summary, Relevancy, clarity, and value. Those are the three pillars of conversion. We covered relevancy and clarity today and their relationships. Make sure that your site is ready for testing. Not every site is ready. It's about information architecture, that's the big one, and then using on-page optimization techniques. Very simple things. Make sure that your site has some sort of baseline so you know when you make changes to the site, okay, you have some better idea of the why that change affected something positive or negative. Tackle the low-hanging fruit first. So again, headers, home pages, navigation menus, and then basic interior page concepts. Those are the 4 areas you're going to probably want to focus on first. The other ones you might want to focus on are forms and shopping carts. So there's a lot of simple things you can do there. Just for time reasons, we didn't get into those today. And then conversion testing. Begin simple but with large variation, and then obviously beware of the inconclusive test patterns and understand when to cut the test off and move on. So we covered a lot of ground with that. This is my contact information. Again, if you want the slides, you can email me, todd@clixoconversion.com. This is our website. And the visitor-centric resource that I mentioned is here. It's a free community. It's based out of Denver. We have a meetup group. There's tons of resources on this site. I think we have over 10,000 articles, probably 500 plus tools, including that heat mapping tool that you guys saw earlier. There's a couple of them on the site. There's some forums there where a lot of my colleagues and I have answered questions and posted cool articles beyond what we've caught with visitor-centric. So it's a free community. It's out there. We're just trying to help people educate themselves. If you have questions, feel free to email me here. And then, like I said, if you want the slide deck for your notes and stuff like that, go ahead and shoot me a note. Questions? Deer in the headlights. Not sure. Go ahead.
What do you recommend to do split testing? How do you replicate a site that you
So there are 3 primary tools. Well, there's a few others, but let's stick with the 3. So Google Website Optimizer is the first one. It's a free tool. That actually just changed, so if you go out and look for it, that's going to close down, I think, in August, and it's now part of Google Analytics, which is called, I think, Content Experiments is the name. Same tool, they just have integrated it inside the analytics package, which is pretty neat, actually. I think it's very helpful. So that's a free one. There's Visual Website Optimizer and Optimizely. Those are 2 of the, I'll call them tier 2. They're cheaper. They're much more affordable, like $50 a month, I think, is where they start. And they're suitable for pretty much any website. There are enterprise level ones like Adobe Test and Target, Monotate, what's the other one I'm thinking of? Optimize something. I'll think of it later. Sorry, you can ask me. I'll think of it and I'll pull it up for you. But those are the enterprise level versions. Autonomy, sorry, that's the name of it. Those are the enterprise level ones. They cost probably thousands of dollars a month. But Visual Website Optimizer and Optimizely are probably the ones that I'd recommend. We use those the most for our clients because they're affordable, and they have a lot of cool segmentation tools and things that we use. Does that answer your question? Well, so from a manual perspective, you obviously have to have both versions. You need the original. Let's take your home page, for example. You have your home page. You'll have a new version of the home page that has to sit on your server somewhere. But then you're going to use these tools. They have some JavaScript tags, and they use that JavaScript to swap out those versions randomly to different visitors as they show up on your site. So it's all automated once you have once you have that second version or whatever else you're trying to do, and they swap that out automatically and calculate things for you. That's the point of using those tools. So the manual side is just physically building the page itself. Does that make sense? Okay.
Have you been able to see the new tool on Google Analytics yet, the content tester? I haven't seen it show up yet.
Yeah, I have. I have a couple different accounts. It's still very basic. I think what you're going to see is it'll be rolled out fully come August, and I think you will also see, right now there isn't a whole lot that you can do with it. I mean, it's very preliminary, but all the segmentation and more advanced data stuff that you can collect and track and things like that, that'll all be available in August, I would bet, because they're going to take Website Optimizer offline come August. Other questions, comments?